Thank you for joining us for our next panel discussion, Skills, Talents, and People in the Future of New Medicines, focusing on the ones who will make the new medicines, as well as shaping this brave new word. I mean, us, the people. We couldn't have a conference addressing how our life science industry is evolving without having this conversation on how to make it more attractive for those who belong there. It's not always about having the best people, but the best suited. And I think who best to lead that conversation than someone who is seeing firsthand the evolution in the industry demographics. And I'd like to invite Tarquin Bennett-Coles, Senior Executive Search Consultant for George James, to join us, and who will be joined by a stellar panel of companies representative to lead this conversation. So whilst they are joining, I would just like to remind you that the chat function is open, and so please ask your questions to the panel there, and I will pass them on to Tarquin. Thank you.
Thank you, and wonderful to be part of the On Helix online conference, and welcome to everybody who's joining us right now. As you heard from Aileen, and I know it's been touched upon already with John, first thing at the keynotes, but also with Anthony Brown and Penny James, the talent piece, the skills, the shortages, retention, how to get hold of people, engage them and keep them, is something I think that probably affects every one of the companies that are here today and the individuals who are through. So I'm delighted. I'm from George James. We are a recruitment training and consultancy company. Though some of you may know me better from my posts about giving blood, but delighted to be here and really pleased to have such a strong panel to join me. So I thought I'd start by just giving the names of the individuals and their current job titles, and there's been a few changes recently, and then they will introduce themselves more formally to you before we kick off. As Aileen said, and thank you to her, and also to Philip, Henry and Alex from Gigabox for helping us do this. What we will do is make a note of any questions that you have, and obviously we'll answer those as we go. We've got a few things to sort of set the scene and some thoughts on the current marketplace. So we'll start there, and then we'll move over to the questions over the course of the next few minutes. Right, so first of all, I'd like to welcome Row Gardner. Row is the VP of Operations and Company Secretary at Microbiotica, but many of you will know her from her time helping out with a number of organizations in the region, both locally and beyond. We're also joined by Rowan Gardner. Rowan is a chair, NED, investor, CEO, founder, and here representing as well Precisionlife, which is right at the cusp of cutting edge science in the space of data analytics and similar and digital health. Also very pleased to welcome Jacqui Watson. Jacqui was the chief of people for Inivata, but after the news of a recent M&A activity, she is now the chief of staff. That's hot off the press. I assume I can share that, Jacqui, but I'm sure you'll tell me otherwise. And I think John actually mentioned the news. I think it came through in about February, so lots to discuss there. And then also really delighted to have Nicole Hamblin from Charles River. Nicole is the Senior Director, Head of Chemistry, DMPK and Early Discovery. And she brings, again, a very interesting point of view from the point of being involved in the CRO, the clinical research environment, and preclinical drug discovery. So we've got a great background of people and a great panel. So delighted that you can all join us. And I'll first pass over, it's okay, to Row Gardner, just to give a little bit of background on herself before we move across the rest of the team. Thank you.
Thanks, Tarquin, and hi, everybody. As Tarquin said, I'm Row Gardner. I'm VP of Operations at Microbiotica, and I'm also on the board of One Nucleus, which is a prestigious post to hold. I'm a lapsed biochemist, so I've been in a lab for a long, long time, and most of my career has been in communications, and for the last 20 years plus in biotech and life sciences, most notably with Convergent Technology, and then more recently with Medimin and AstraZeneca. I joined the BIA about 13 years ago when I left CAT, and have subsequently worked with a number of companies in this sector in Cambridge, but in increasingly operational roles. And operational roles usually bring the remit for people. So that's why I'm on this panel today, I believe. Thanks, Tarquin.
Thank you, Row. And Rowan, if I could pass over to you, and you will notice, everybody, we are challenging you by having two people with the first two letters of R and G. So if you can follow us on this, that would be brilliant. So Rowan, thank you.
Thank you, Tarquin. I'm Rose Doppelganger, and when I'm not being Rose Doppelganger, I too am a lapsed biochemist. I joined a company called Oxford Molecular pretty much straight out of university, and that was one of the early university spin-outs, and grew with that. Much like Row, was involved in communications, investor relations, as that business acquired many US based companies as it grew. Then I went on to co-found a business called Sonomics, which was an early integration architecture for life science data federated to be brought together for analysis. And really, this is the theme of my career. I'm a life science data entrepreneur at heart. I then founded an advisory firm, BioLauncher, with a fantastic biotechnologist and proper scientist, Dr. Dirk Gavert, and we advised around 40 startups through the first decade of this century. In sort of 2013-14, I co-founded Precisionlife with my husband again, and Gert Muller, who's the most impressive mathematician I've ever had the privilege of working with. And very shortly after that, found myself not exactly planned as the CEO of an innovative hygiene company. I managed to work through and grow that business, and I left just really as the pandemic hit in May 2021 to begin a portfolio career. And remote working has been a very interesting challenge in that context. I'm sure we'll talk about that. But I am now an independent member for Digital Health and Care in Wales, which is the new special health authority tasked with digital health and clinical informatics and the transformation that it will make on healthcare over the next decade. And I also chair the inaugural Science and Pioneer Award on behalf of Cartier's Women's Initiative, which throws me in the way of other impactful innovations beyond life science. I'm delighted today, Tarquin. This is going to be a great conversation.
I'm just already impressed by the amount of experience you both bring to bear. So yeah, we're looking forward to getting started. Jacqui, if I could pass on to you. Thank you. Sorry, Jacqui, we have a mute situation.
Do you know, that's the story of our lives throughout this pandemic and working from home and working on these two-dimensional mediums. You're on mute. Sorry about that. I'm Jacqui Watson. I'm the, or was the CPO at Inivata, now Chief of Staff since our acquisition by Neogenomics. Feeling quite enormous and quite of all this talent and all this amazing biotech talent that I'm surrounded by here today. I'm an age-old HR professional. I've worked in HR and L&D for the majority of my professional life. And, you know, I was talking to someone that I'm mentoring the other day who asked me what it is that's kept me in this kind of role sort of throughout the last 30 odd years. And you know, and what my superpower was within it. And it's because I'm just curious, or good old fashioned nosy, as my dad would have said. So I love finding out about people, what makes them tick, and more to the point, what helps them be their best self. So that's what I'm all about. And it's good to be here today.
Thank you, Jacqui. That's fantastic. I love that thought about curiosity. It's certainly something I think that keeps everybody engaged. And this is a sector where I think if you don't have curiosity, you're going to struggle after a while. So
absolutely, absolutely.
I should also say an extra special thank you for Jacqui. She's meant to be on holiday, everybody, but she's come to do this for us. So thank you again for your time.
Okay.
Okay, I'd like to hand over now to Nicole, last but no means least. So please, if you give us a bit of background on yourself, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks, Tarquin. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Nicole Hamblin. As Tarquin said, I head up the chemistry and DMPK, that's the drug metabolism group, in the early discovery division at Charles River. For those that don't know, Charles River is a global contract research company, employs over 14,000 people worldwide, most famous for small furry animal experiments, but actually the part of the business that I work in, we provide end-to-end drug discovery services, really, from target identification through to clinical candidates, into safety assessment, and then actually all the way through to launch, supporting the non-clinical aspects of drug development. In my role, I lead a cross-discipline team. I have about 200 scientists who do medicinal chemistry, computational and analytical chemistry, DMPK and structural biology. So I have a discipline diverse team. And we work with different clients across the industry, from big pharma to small and medium-sized biotechs, charities, and academic groups, to try and progress drug discovery projects in partnership through contract research. For myself, I'm a medicinal chemist by training. I've been with Charles River for 4 years. Before that, I spent 20 years at GlaxoSmithKline, leading discovery and development of various clinical candidates, from hit identification through to phase 2 clinical trials. I sit on panels for the Royal Society of Chemistry. I've sat on MRC grant funding panels as well. But I'm really passionate about people and talent development. I trained as a coach, and since I've joined Charles River, I've been involved in establishing career frameworks and mentoring programs, and it's something that I'm really passionate about. So I'm really pleased to be part of the panel today.
Fantastic, thank you. Again, it just strikes me, having heard all of you introduce yourselves, that not only do we have a breadth of skills and experience within the life sciences, but the experiences stretch way beyond that. So it'll be interesting to draw on some of those perspectives when we talk. I thought we'd start off, and I'm sure that the people watching will be interested in just talking a little bit about the convergent technology space and how, with life sciences, and again, it's been touched on earlier in the day already, looking at how those new skills, as it were, particularly in the digital health market and using medium like this to communicate, how that's impacting the sector, the life science sector, but more broadly, how we as a sector can attract, integrate, retain, potentially keep, and also in some cases release people from our companies. How are we going to bring them in on board? What can we do as a group of organizations, as an ecosystem, and with the sort of partnerships we have in place, not just locally, but internationally, but particularly post-pandemic and post-Brexit. So that is a big topic to cover. There's also the aspects of inclusion and diversity, and how we can manage that in an environment where there will be some people who will have to be in the office because of lab work and certain experiments, and others who might be able to remain remotely pretty much indefinitely over the next few years. So I thought I'd start by that, and I will start by putting this question to the panel. So is there a panelist who would like to step up first to give some thoughts about the early adoption and the challenges that we face as a unit? Oh, yes, straight away, Rowan's in there. So Rowan, if I hand over to you, I thought you might be interested in this one. Over to you.
So I suppose, Tarquin, I've always been at the strange edge of life science and computing. So, the view from the periphery, which has found itself a bit like an old pair of flare trousers suddenly back in fashion, is that you have to be worthy of great talent. Particularly as you are seeking to attract people into the industry from disciplines that might not be thought of as traditional life sciences, you have to recognize they have a lot of opportunity outside this very fine industry that we're all proud to work in. And you have to tell a great story first and foremost. And I think the other challenge is, because you are seeking talent beyond the classical life science network, you have to work really hard, and you have to think about other sources of talent that perhaps might not be on everyone's radar. And I've been part of doing some really sort of daft stroke unusual things over the years to try and attract talent. And I'm thinking back to the late 90s when we were all worried about Y2K, and you couldn't get a software programmer to save your life. So, we advertised at the local cinema in Cambridge. What do techno nerds do? well, maybe they go to the cinema at the weekend. So, you know, we were advertising to hire there, and those are the sorts of, you know, slightly offbeat thoughts you have to bring to bear in finding these kinds of people and starting a conversation with them.
Thank you. And that's such a good point about the adopting a different approach. I know similarly, I had a situation with a client based on the South Coast. We decided to advertise in some of the yachting and boating journals for people. And yet again, yeah, they came through that route, not the normal route you would have thought at all. But Jacqui, I see you've got something to comment, so please fire away. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're both right. I think you've got to be willing to adopt new ideas to try and attract people into your companies. But I think what's really important as well is to have a strong brand. You know, people, I think most of the people that we want to attract into our business are very passionate about what they do. They want that real true purpose around what they're doing. And, you know, in order to bring that talent in, and it's a real war trying to sort of get talent and trying to, you know, you feel like you're fighting everyone to try and get the right people into your organization. But you know, you have to have a really good story to tell. You have to enable people to be their best selves, to, you know, do their best work. And you've got to be a part of that story, and you've got to be able to tell that really, really well. You're on mute, Tarquin. Your turn.
I'm just testing everyone was keeping up. Thank you. Yeah, I was just saying a really important point there about the, you know, Rowan, you touched on it too, about having a really good story to tell and engaging with the people, because ultimately, particularly if we're remote, there needs to be a shared mission. Otherwise, as you said, people are going to be disappearing off. So Nicole or Ro, do either of you want to pick up on that kind of the story piece, or what you've done as businesses to maybe create the sort of brand image that is going to attract people? Nicole, over to you first. Sorry.
That's okay. I was just going to draw a parallel really to something I think happened in the CRO industry over the last few years in terms of trying to attract a different type of talent base. So historically in our industry, it was predominantly made up from people who'd left pharma during sort of periods of real consolidation during the early 2000s. It wasn't that difficult to attract them. We just asked them to use their expertise to help partners run their projects. And, you know, they were looking for a home and we needed the experience, and that was actually fairly passive. But now those things don't happen anymore. And we've actually really changed our talent base to retain that experience and continue to bring it in, but really to start building from the bottom up. And I would say now in the CRO industry in the UK, we employ probably more bench scientists than some of the big pharma companies do in the area. And with that came a real recognition of who are you selling to, and make sure you give the messages that are really current for those people. So we've had to kind of really change our culture to focus on things that we've heard about today, like sustainability, corporate social responsibility, making work fun and sociable, things that perhaps the previous generation of scientists weren't necessarily looking for. Making it more digital, selling that message that it's a real training ground, and make sure we have training programs for people and recognise it's actually our responsibility in CROs now to train that next generation, where before we were looking to just take the training that had been done in big pharma and utilise it in our projects. So building career frameworks, mentoring programs, and we've really had to shift across the industry to recognise the types of people that we want to attract. And I think that's a parallel with the type of thing we need to do now, looking at the broader discipline recruitment ground and thinking who we're selling to and what exactly is it that they are looking for, and trying to adapt our messages to the people we want to recruit.
Thank you. I'm just about to go to Ro, but before I do, Nicole, if I can ask you a quick question on that, because it throws up a conversation there about the sort of partnerships and ecosystem. Of course, you're doing work for other organizations, and there are going to be times when those organizations are interested in your people. How do you manage that process? I think poor old Rose trying to keep the light on when she hears automatic lighting. So I assume you don't want me to go straight to you, Ro, but I will in just a second, I promise. So yeah, Nicole, I wonder if you could just give some thoughts about how you manage that, retaining that staff, but also maybe accepting sometimes that you might lose some to the very companies you've been working with.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and it does affect us and other people in our industry as well. I think it was a point I was going to bring in later, but it's very competitive at the moment. We're seeing a phase of people moving around. I think it's those retention tools really, and making sure that we have reasons for people to stay with us, and a real brand that was mentioned before, and a company culture that people want to be part of and want to stay involved with, and that has to span all of the expertise areas, not just those newer, younger people that we're bringing in, but also those experienced people. And we've been relatively successful in also recruiting experience in from pharma. I'd probably be a good example of that, and just trying to sell what's different about working in the industry and why people would want to come and work here. But I think it's not only about the recruitment side there, it's also about the retention, and trying to make it a place that people want to stay. But it's definitely a challenge.
Great, thank you. And Ro, I'm going to go to you, and before I do, just a couple of thoughts, I thought, because you're obviously here representing Microbiotica, and you've got a brand new, fantastic facility over at Chesterford Research Park, but you've worked with CAT and in other organizations and at the BIA, and you've seen some of these trends come and go, before in different worlds. So interested in your perspective on this, about the sort of story in terms of communications, which I know you're so strong on.
Yes.
How you create that brand. So sorry, over to you.
Thank you. And apologies for the I can control most about my computer, but I can't control the lighting in the ceiling, which is a real frustration. So I need to move around a bit more. But yes, thank you, Tarquin. I was just thinking about what Jacqui said about building a story, and thinking how in larger organizations that's quite easy, because you have the resources and the capacity to really do a lot of work to build a story that then you share externally. But for smaller companies, it's actually a little bit harder. You haven't got you're starting up, you've got energy and excitement, but you haven't got the resources to really make a big splash about your organization. In those situations, you're really counting on your science to lead, because what brings scientists to new companies is the energy and the chance they can make a real impact to something that's new. And we saw that a while ago with antibodies, and now at Microbiotica, we're looking at microbiome, which is a very high profile area of science at the moment. So whereas we can't really do much about the communications and the sort of active profile raising, we can really coast and make the most of and exploit the scientific advantage that we've got. And people who want to work with us really are into that new area of science and want to make a difference and be part of that. That's maybe the difference I can see.
Thank you, that's really helpful. And I know we touched upon this as a group, sort of when we had a pre-discussion, but I'm also interested in knowing where our threats are coming from. So we talked about a mission, and of course, bearing in mind we're in healthcare, there is a primary mission there to improve patient care and hopefully make some major difference in the way relatives, friends, and others outside in the global marketplace might be impacted. But we're not alone in having a positive mission, as it were. So I just want to put this to the panel. Who do we need to keep an eye on, and what do we need to do to reinforce that message if there are other communities using the same sort of mission-driven perspective? Ro, if I can go to you, and then Rowan, you're next after that, if that's okay. Thank you.
Sorry, thanks, Tarquin. Just a small point, really, and thinking about the profile of life sciences versus the other sectors that are out there that are also leading in their world, whether it's digital or climate change or the other sectors that really have a capacity to make a contribution. I think at the moment, given the pandemic we're just all living through, the demonstration of how nimble as a sector we can be and how fast we have worked in the last year to produce something that really has global impact should do a lot to help us attract people who want to make a contribution, because I can see how immediately and how fast the sector can react, and hopefully how they can bring a contribution to that work.
Fantastic, thank you. And Rowan, I know you had a point to make on this too. Thank you, Rowan.
Well, I think, it's important to be both confident and humble. We're definitely going to have some of our top talent looking to solve problems around climate change, accessibility, those sort of diversity and inclusion challenges, the ESG, and quite frankly, in our industry, I'm being a little bit flippant. You have to get ill in order to benefit. Well, the pandemic has proven that actually prevention is quite a big opportunity as well. Whereas, these other challenges, to some extent, you can be healthy and benefit from those. So, I want all of those businesses to succeed as well. When I look at sort of data science, which I find myself always looking for top data science talent, people tend to come out of the hard scientists, PhD level, and they can almost go into any role. They can walk into one of the major banks, they can go into retail. All the online retail space is very digitally driven, but there's always more kudos in coming and working and solving challenges around the day-to-day of, can you cure cancer, can you improve aging, and through microbiome interventions. There's a wonderful story to tell, but I think we have to have a measure of humility in telling it as well.
Thank you. That's such a good point, and I really like the way you put that about the being humble but confident. Yeah, and it's a fine line to walk. So, I've got a great question from the audience that Aileen shared. So, thank you. So, I thought I would put that to each of you in turn. We'll start with Nicole this time. So, the question is, what do you think are the most valuable skills that we're looking for in employees at this time? So what are the most valuable skills? And if you can give me one that you could think of, and it might be specific to the area that you're covering, but it might be broader, and then I'll go around the rest of the panel. So after Nicole, if it could be Jacqui, and then Rowan, and then Ro. Thank you.
I think I'm going to steal it from Ro from earlier, is that, or somebody's mentioned Jacqui, sorry, the curiosity. So I think it has to be that scientific curiosity. So we always look for, people who are really driven to understand scientific problems and motivated to try and solve them. So whilst it's not something you necessarily learn in your training, it's something that you should develop as you go through, and just be curious and keep asking the questions. And that's something that I would certainly look for with any new talent.
For me, it's, most of the people that we're attracting into the industry have the technical competence that you require. They're amazing, amazing people. But what I'm really looking for as well is the ability to communicate really well, because if you can have all of these talents, you can be the most fantastic biomathematician or whatever area of competence that you have. But if you can't communicate really well, then it can be a bit of a struggle. So for me, it's that communication that's key.
If I go to Rowan next. Thank you, Jacqui.
So I think I'm looking for resilience, because everything that Nicole and Jacqui said, absolutely. But we are just living through a period of uncertainty, not just due to the pandemic, but we've got Brexit, we've got climate change. There's a lot of things that are impacting outside of our lives that we can't control. And that inevitably brings pressures, consideration into the workplace. And so if people who can be resilient and cope with that level of ambiguity are really precious.
Thank you. Sorry, Ro, I'm afraid curiosity, communication and resilience have gone.
That's okay. I'm going to build on what Rowan said, actually make resilience into flexibility, because I think the businesses evolve faster than ever these days. There are innovations and competitive factors and economic factors that we can't control, but they impact inside the business far faster than they used to. And so as somebody coming in thinking they're doing a job in a certain area, they could find very quickly that's altered, the direction's altered, the strategy's altered, whatever it is. And having the flexibility to just bounce back and pick up the new challenge is really key.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm struck by those, those four sort of characteristics, as it were. There are things that obviously you can check an interview, you can explore and so on. The one interesting one though, Jacqui, and I just want to come back to you, is communication, because again, in a world where a lot of people have been trained to communicate and network face to face, we're now doing it virtually and online. And as I join you as a mute person here who's made that mistake already, how do you manage, what tips would you give for someone if they're going to be communicating on a platform like this rather than face to face? Because a lot of the work I'm doing, it's all virtual, including the onboarding, the start, everything. So yeah, your thoughts would be welcome.
Yeah, I think for me, this has been one of the most difficult things about the pandemic, has been learning, to live in this two-dimensional world that we're all living in right now. Making Zoom, making Teams, and any of these mediums that we're using, just making them your friend. And I know it's hard. I know it's not quite the same, but I guess I'm a real touchy-feely person. I love to be there. I love to be in the room. I love to be speaking with people. But, this is the next best thing. And it's making that extra effort, because you do have to make an extra effort. Onboarding people during the pandemic. When this all first started a year ago, past March, this was one of the things, I got together with my team and said, how are we going to do this? Because we were recruiting no end of people over the period, over this last sort of 15, 16 months. How do we do this? How do we do this really well? And, we've looked at all sorts of things. We've looked at, how we mentor, how we coach, how we even just have a cup of coffee with someone. It's so important to do that. How you work with your people managers as well around this, and just this constant reminder with people, people aren't automatons. You can't just get on a Zoom call and start your meeting. You've still got to remember to do the social piece too, just to check in with people, make sure they're okay. And working with the people managers around that has probably actually been one of the most difficult things to do. And this is where I'm saying, communication is really, really important, actually. And I like Rowan's resilience, because that's been really important over this whole period as well. But it is making all of these mediums your friend. It's being, if you can be comfortable on it, you can help your people be comfortable on it. And that for me was one of the most important learnings.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jacqui. That's really helpful. And I saw, Ro, you've got something to add to that too. So,
well, yes, actually, Jacqui's absolutely right in how hard we've all had to work to get used to working in this way. But we're going to have to change again, because I think as people start coming back into the offices and the labs, and we have a more hybrid model, it's going to be harder now to do it not in reverse, but we're never going to get back to being all in-person meetings, or maybe we won't, but the hybrid is even harder to manage. Having some in meeting rooms and some on their own camera is just as difficult, if not harder. And we have to think about how we're going to manage that as well.
So you've posed a great question, Ro, and I'm going to throw it back to you and the panel. What would be your tips for managing the new hybrid working place? Because that's, if we're talking, retaining talent, attracting talent, and making them feel part of an inclusive group, this is going to be absolutely crucial. So I see Jacqui's already ready to sponsor you, Ro. I'm going to let Ro go first, because it was her challenge she raised, so she can answer that, and then I'll pass on to Jacqui. Thank you.
And I don't think in the organisation I currently work with mostly, it's going to be too much of a challenge, because actually there's a universal hatred of Zoom amongst most people. And there's a universal hatred even further of hybrid Zoom, where you have half in a meeting and half not. So I think it's going to be very straightforward to encourage people to come back in for meetings. When they're key, they're going to be in person. And I think that's a very reasonable thing to work towards. There'll always be somebody remote, but that's always been the case in the industry. And then you have a conference call or dial-ins. But I think there will be an enthusiasm to go back the other way as soon as it's practicable to do so.
Actually, I have to say, although, I hear what you're saying, Ro, I have to disagree. in that, you know, I've spent a lot of time over the last few months speaking to people and asking people what they want from this going forward. And when we can go back into the workplace, what do they want to do? You know, and there's a real mixed bag of what people want. You know, some people want to be at home. They're really embracing working from home, and they would like that to continue. And others do want to come back into the office, but actually I would say, you know, more don't than do. Or they want that flexibility of being able to or not. But for me, the big question is asking your people what it is they want to do. Because I think, you know, their views, their opinions are what we have to listen to. And that going forward is going to be part of your employee brand. So you really have to listen to what it is that your people want. And I think we've all proved over this sort of last 15, 16 months that we have been in the pandemic and we have been working from home about how darn well we can do it. So, you know, one of the great things is that trust that's been built up between the employer and the employee. And that for me is just fantastic. So, you know, I think the hybrid model might be a little tricky to manage, but I think through good communication and through really speaking and listening to what your people want, you can get through that. You can build it, and you can build it in a way that's going to suit as many people as possible.
Well, I wouldn't disagree, Jacqui. I mean, we have done quite a lot of research, but we're a tiny company, so I think people actually are still hungry to be together.
Yeah, and I was just going to pick up that point, Nicole. I'll go to you just in 1 second, just as well as to say, of course, and this is what's interesting about this. Different companies will have different needs, you know, and Microbiotica have to have people in the labs. They have to do certain things. So there has to be a presence in the office. So you can instantly see if you start just doing it remotely, there's going to be a group who might feel a little bit disgruntled that they somehow feel they've got to be in, or vice versa. So getting that balance in each organization is going to be important. So Jacqui, you're so right about having some sort of forum where you can all talk about this and come to a conclusion that's going to work. It's going to be critical. And critical, of course, if we're thinking about hiring new talent in, you know, for which function will it be? But let me pass over to Nicole. And then just to let you know, we've got a stream of questions coming through. So I'm going to do yes, no answers in a second, potentially. So be warned. But Nicole, over to you, please.
I was going to be brief, and you said a couple of things I was going to say. I guess for us as a CRO, it is going to be a hybrid movement because we've got clients we would have travelled to see before and they would have come to see us. I think there'll be less travel. I think we have got a lot of lab-based scientists who need to be on site. And then we do have those people, Jacqui, that you mentioned, who actually quite enjoy being at home and don't need to be on site. And how do we manage that? And we've gone for an employee-led discussion at the moment. What would people like to do? But I think there is that sort of business balance as drug discovery is a team sport, and you can't necessarily work completely remotely if you're part of that team. So I do think there is that mixture of what the business needs, for us, what the clients need as well, and then what the individual needs, and we'll come to some kind of happy balance, hopefully, eventually. But I do think with Row a little bit that we just need to navigate those waters and see how it lands ultimately.
Thank you. And I should just let everybody know, if you see me looking down, I'm writing with a 1 nucleus pen. I used to add some notes. So that's why every now and again you might see me looking down. But I've got a question now for each of you very quickly, which is, what do you think the leaders of the future need to do to upskill for these changes? And I'll go around you one after the other. So Rowan, I'm going to pick on you first, if that's okay.
You've got to become much more digitally fluent. Yeah, the old kind of stereotype of because you're older, you didn't need to know these skills. I mean, it's particularly as we're going to use these skills more often going forward. You know, I agree with all of the comments, because we're a diverse industry. We're going to have all be on a different spectrum. But, you know, it's absolutely core at Precisionlife, not just because of what we do, but we're already an organization with 28 people with 4 offices in 4 countries. So, you know, our teamwork is online. So I think it's finding the way of being authentic, but in a 2-dimensional box, really.
Fantastic. I think that could be one of the sound bites for this session. Authentic. I like it. Yeah, and in the 2D world. So, Ro, can I pass to you with that question?
Yes, I think I would, again, building on Rowan's answer, but looking at actually developing the management skills to build teams where you're not face to face, and to somehow provide the opportunity for spontaneity that you just can't get if you're not in the same place as somebody else. That's going to be a real challenge, but I think if you can master that, it'll make a big difference.
Lovely, thank you. Yeah, I can absolutely see that. And Jacqui, are you ready for this question, or shall I go to Nicole?
No, I'm fine. For me, I agree with Rowan around authenticity. I think that is so important, and building these relationships across these mediums is absolute key. I think leaders have still got to have these skills that they've always had to have over the years. They've still got to have that ability to build great teams. They've still got to, they still have to be these charismatic people that people will happily, follow. But the authenticity for me as a leader is critical.
Thank you. And again, I guess you're going to have to work even harder to get that message across in the current environment because of the 2D world. It is different.
It is different. It is different, but it's doable. It is very doable.
Fantastic. And Nicole?
I completely agree with the high performing teams piece, but I think what the leaders are going to have to do is be a bit more open-minded on how those teams are made up, and this blurring of the disciplines and the funding of the science at the interface, which is going to deliver us talent that actually can work cross-discipline. And the leaders haven't really necessarily been through that themselves, and they need to be more open-minded about how we work at the interface of the discipline. We're getting chemistry PhD students who've run their own assays, we're getting mathematicians who are building models for drug discovery, and the leaders of the teams, they're not going to have their own individual discipline for that. They're going to have to work flexibly and understand how it all comes together. So for me, that's really exciting, but I think for some, that may be something they'll need to develop and learn.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's a great one. And that sort of cross-functional, multidisciplinary working is it's clearly happening more and more, and particularly as things are getting outsourced in so many different businesses. No one's doing it from beginning to end completely. And I've got a very good question from the audience here that I wanted to share. And apologies, we're probably not going to get through everybody's questions. So if it doesn't get mentioned, apologies to you. I don't know who says them, but thank you. So the next one, a quick answer from each panelist. How do you build loyalty in this new world? Anyone like to go first? Jacqui, over to you. Thank you.
My mouse is misbehaving. For me, building loyalty is all about, as I said earlier, it's about helping people and enabling people to do their best work. But also to realize that you probably are not going to have people for, for a lifetime. It's a very different world now. And, if you have that loyalty for a specific time and then people move on to further their careers, then you have to accept and respect that going forward. I mean, for me, it's not just how we onboard people, but it's also how we offboard people. How they leave is just as important as how they join.
Yeah, thank you. That was a fantastic answer. And I love that point of actually maybe thinking about people's tenure as project-based rather than time-based. So yeah, really nice. And Ro, can I pass to you on that? And then Rowan, across to you as well, because I know you both want to answer this.
I was just going to say something along the lines of honesty and communication, and being upfront with employees if there are issues and there are problems, and not pretending that something's not working, and accepting that we're all learning to work differently. And if people can understand that it's maybe not just their experience, but everyone's experiencing the same, and that's coming from the top, then you're going to work more supportively and collaboratively to solve the problem. I think that really engages people's levels of loyalty to the organisation.
Thank you. Rowan?
I think you have to recognise that loyalty is something that's multidimensional. So people can be loyal to the mission, and they'll put up with a bit if they just want to be part of where you're going. You know, to Rose's point, you know, you share the rewards, you share the pain, but they can also be loyal to their colleagues. And so building loyalty is something that goes through the organization, that everyone you know, has that respect for their colleagues. It's part of the values of the organization that you seek to establish. And to Jacqui's point, you know, it's how quickly you particularly when you bring people in, how you adapt the canvas to bring an individual thread and weave them into the organization. I think it's multidimensionally the loyalty question, but it's not one person's responsibility. It's a collective endeavor is how I would characterize it.
Fantastic, thank you. And you know, it makes me think, I was a teacher many moons ago, and I went back into the classroom not that long ago, and we always had the message of differentiation, you know, always differentiating by the individual, and by doing that you actually end up treating everybody the same way. And I wonder if as organizations we need to be focusing more on the individual and how we keep them and retain them and for how long, rather than the mission, as it were, of the business. But just before we wrap up, and we've got about 5 minutes left, I thought it would be great to get each of you to give a quick thought on a challenge that you see and a solution that you can offer given this new working environment. And I will touch on the B word, Brexit, and if any of you want to touch on that briefly, that's absolutely fine. It's come up in the questions, but we only have 5 minutes, so be warned. But if I can just move around the panel one after the other. So I'll start with Ro, and then go to Jacqui, Nicole, and Rowan. So as I said, just one idea, one challenge, as it were, and one solution. Thank you.
Well, this is a very practical challenge, I think, that's facing a lot of people coming back into the workspace, and that's adjusting to work with background noise around them. It's people have been used to having silence or their favourite band playing in the background, and all of a sudden they're back in an office or a lab where they've got people who are chatting, there are phone calls. It's going to be exhausting for some people for a short while when they come back in. And I think the solution is to understand this, to recognise it, to allow use of noise cancelling headphones if you wouldn't normally have cancelling headphones in your offices, and just accept that people are going to really readjust. We all left home, left work very quickly at the beginning of the pandemic. We suddenly weren't in. We've got the luxury of having some time to adjust and to do a transition this time. So I think it's being patient and accepting there are differences from working at home and working in the office.
Fantastic, thank you. And I know, you know, from my own experience, and certainly my daughter, her concentration span has reduced a little in face-to-face interaction. So I can absolutely hear where you're coming from on that, Ray. Really good point. Thank you. And Jacqui?
For me, my biggest challenge at the moment, I think, is around culture, because I think if we look at what's happened over the last 15 months, so trying to keep your culture in place and trying to ensure that everyone understood where you were has been really hard. And for me, the biggest difficulty is that we have just been acquired by a much bigger company, and actually a very different company to ours. So therefore, you know, one of my big challenges going forward is going to be around how I merge these two cultures, and I don't have the answer. So, you know, if anyone does, get in touch, please.
Thank you, Jacqui. That's a great call to arms there. And Nicole?
That's a great point, Jacqui. I completely agree with you. The one I was going to pick up on we touched on earlier was this flexible working theme, and actually people's requests and trying to fit that in with the business needs. And actually a solution might be to use it to our advantage. So particularly in a CRO world where time is money and we have equipment sitting dormant usually 2 days a week at the weekends, we're thinking about maybe we can utilize that to our advantage and look for a workforce that might want to work at the weekends or work slightly different hours to fit with their own personal circumstances, also against the Brexit backdrop as well, if we struggle to recruit from the EU, how flexible can we be? Can we have people sitting in other countries in office-based roles, working for us, working with us, closer to maybe our European clients, and trying to use that flexibility to our advantage is something that's an active conversation for us now in areas where bottlenecks can occur in a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday week. How can we use that, and where do we find those people that really want to work in that truly flexible way? So that would be mine.
Thank you, Nicole. That's a great. And just to wrap up and to finish, Rowan, you're going to get the last word. I want to thank everybody on the panel. I know we're about to close down shortly, but Rowan, any parting words? And thank you, Aileen, and on Helix for putting this on today. But over to you, Rowan, to wrap up.
Well, responding to Jacqui's call to arms, having done a fair through M&As with UK, US companies, is there is generally more that unites us than divides us in life sciences. So focus on what's in common.
Fantastic. Thank you. Aileen, over to you. And thank you again, everybody, for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much all, and spot on time. Amazing, because that's a conversation that could have carried on for another hour or hours. I have so many notes that I don't know how to wrap that up, to be honest. But I think what my take on is your job is much more complicated than it was before, because it's dealing with this purpose-driven companies that you have to highlight, build a brand of companies, thinking outside of the box to recruit the right talents from outside, like Rowan mentioned, and all of that just exacerbated by the whole pandemic situation of having people were just shifting the way they wanted to go back to work. So I'm very pleased for you. You have lots of work still going on, and that's good. And maybe next time is to discuss your own challenges of keeping all of that together. That would be really, really interesting. So thank you very much all. That was really good. And thanks for everyone who contributed in the chat box. It's always good to have that a bit interactive. So we're now breaking for 20 minutes. And we're coming back, so at 20 past, if I'm counting correctly, for the 2 closing panels of day 1. In the meantime, have a look on the app, make connections with other delegates, also check on the rest of the program for the rest of the week. We have a full day tomorrow and innovation workshops on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So if you want to book them now in your calendar, it's a good time. And we have an amazing hashtag on Helix 21 that you can use for tagging us and the great conversation in social media. Thank you.